This is Ella Cerrone reporting for James Cole. Today's topic is empathy via the internet, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And so I feel like it's only fitting for us to start and ask you, what does empathy mean to you?
I mentioned this before in this discussion, but I think something I've been thinking about for quite a while, and that I think the world has been thinking about a lot since COVID started, is how fragile reality is. How some groups of people can think there was massive fraud in an election, and other people think that that's crazy. And I'm not talking about a couple people, I'm talking about tens of millions of people holding two completely different beliefs. Or that capitalism is good or capitalism is bad, or that wealth should be redistributed or that wealth shouldn't, or that our healthcare system is just fine or that it's a complete mess. These paradoxical views that tens of millions of Americans hold simultaneously shows how fragile and malleable reality is. And then when you bring that down to a personal level, you can have a conversation with someone that you care a lot about, and you can think that the conversation's going one way and they can experience it another. And when you start really getting into the weeds, you realize that reality is so fragile, and it's but fleeting moments that other human beings share our reality. And it's my belief that the people that you hold most dear, whether it's family or a spouse or a best friend or what have you, are those who more frequently share your reality, who more frequently see things the way you do. And so I think the greatest gift you can give another person is, if you care about them, you're more likely to just instinctively share their reality. But if you don't, try. And if you go through the act of empathizing and wondering, why do they feel this way? And how can I try to understand where they're coming from and make them feel seen and make them feel that their reality is real, as opposed to questioning it or challenging it. So the act of empathizing and sharing someone else's reality, giving them a partner in their little reality plane, I think is one of the greatest gifts you can give someone.
My next question is broken up into two parts, so I'll just take it one at a time. How does empathy manifest in your personal life right now?
Any relationship in my life, I mean, I'm so intense and I'm so packed. We're all busy, but I really try to make sure that my day is jam packed and I'm squeezing the juice out of every hour. And so anyone that I spend time with is someone with whom I empathize, or who empathizes with me, someone whose reality that I find that I share, or that they make an effort to share mine. You know, I don't like spending time in rooms or with people that just categorically don't share my reality. Um, so I'd say empathy is the driving force behind every interaction I have. Like I try my best to empathize with the other person, and I hope they do the same with me. And if that happens, there can be an intimate relationship. And if not, then there really can't. And then I often don't engage in that relationship anymore, just because life is too short.
And then the other part of my question is, how does that empathy, and as I'm asking this question, I'm sure there are going to be overlaps with the previous one, but just how does empathy manifest in your business life as an entrepreneur?
That one's a bit more challenging. I guess, like being a human being, there's a very delicate balance between, you need to ping off of cell towers, you need to take input from lots of people. So I have a board now, 10 people, and they all give advice. They're all really smart people. And 94% of the time, I'm like, wow, that I wouldn't have thought of that, or that's a really interesting way to conceptualize. That's really helpful. But 6% of the time, I kind of have to stick to my guns and my instinct, because I'm the one that's really in it. Just like we as humans, you get input from friends or people you care about, and that can help you. But sometimes you know you best, and you have to stay true to yourself. So with entrepreneurship, it's about never being bullheaded, never thinking that you know best and completely ignoring the signs, the data, the advice of those that you respect. Um, But in the same breath, you have to be confident and you have to wake up every day believing in your thing more than anyone else. So I think empathy is a bit of a double-edged sword in entrepreneurship, where if you're too empathetic and if you're too concerned what others think, definitionally a startup is disruptive. It's meant to be new. It's meant to push boundaries. And so there are people constantly telling you, whoa, 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 there's a boundary there. It's like, well, yeah, that's the point. I'm trying to get over that boundary. So you have to be really careful to empathize, to listen, to take input, but to also stay true to your instinct and your vision that other people just might not see.
How did you develop that balance in your life? Did you get it wrong sometimes in the past, and what did that look like?
I think the hardest challenge has been with my team. Um, I'm a sole founder. And in the beginning, I was the leader, unequivocally. I started the company and so on. And as time has marched on, there are senior people at the company that have been around for 3 years. And they're really smart and they know all the little nooks and crannies of the company that I do. And so are they my equals or am I still the leader? And I think maybe that's the area I've struggled the most, is wanting, several times trying to bring senior people along and sort of put them on my level, show them the respect of like, I care what you think and your voice counts as much as mine. And a bit of a paradox is being collaborative is so important, but at the same time, companies need leadership, people need leadership, people need structure, most do. And so if you don't lead, if you don't take the risk of sticking your neck out and saying what you believe and pushing what you believe and letting people fall in line of that, sometimes the people that you work with find themselves in a directionless, structureless state. So the hardest balance I've had to find is showing respect to my peers, showing respect to my employees, that I value their opinion, but still being the boss, still being the leader. And how do you do both of those things at once? It's hard.
I'm curious too how empathy manifests when you're just doing the day to day. I'm struck by one of the first conversations we had was about the 8-hour experiment you did to see if you could stand up a company. And I'm curious if in running those ads, empathy played any part at all, or if empathy manifests in any element of the day to day of your marketing work.
Well, something that's sort of scary, Ella, is that I think marketing of old was all empathy. In other words, coming up with an ad campaign, like how are we going to get people to smoke our brand of cigarettes? And you have to tell a story that will resonate with people. And so you have to understand people, not just one person, but people, the masses. What do they care about? What are the trends? Where are people's heads at? How can we speak to them in a way that resonates? But now there's so much data. Most ad campaigns are not, still the biggest companies don't do this, but any small up and coming company, their advertising is 99% digital, if not 100%. And digital has so many little signals, so much data. And so brands today are built from the bottom of the pyramid up. They're built from the opinions of all of the customers up to the brand. And this informs this. Whereas previously it was the opposite. It was the top of the pyramid, the opinion of a boardroom told people what to think. So the story was made up by a group of 5 people and it was told to 5 million. Now it's 5 million people give you data, which should inform the brand, you know? And that bottom up or bottom down, however you want to say it, people powered marketing is the pervasive and most successful form of marketing now. So when I started my company, like the only way to successfully launch a marketing initiative in 8 hours is if you're using data, if you're seeing how people react, iterating the messaging, seeing how people react, iterating the messaging. And if you can do that enormously quickly, you can do that in 8 hours. Whereas in 20 years ago, it might have been come up with the idea as a boardroom, try it for a year. How did that go? What did sales do? Okay, maybe we come up with something different, try it for the next year. And it might be 8 years before you find the voice, as opposed to 8 hours, because now we have so much data, so much turnover.
Do you think data can be informed by empathy, or is it just purely numbers?
Well, I mean, the really, really dangerous thing is like, where does the loop start? So editorial is an interesting example, right? Like 20 years ago, an editorial entity decided what to write, it wrote about it, and then people read it. And now editorial sites look at what's getting readership and they write more about those things. So they're getting their hot leads, they're getting their topics, they're getting their subject matter from the data. So just like brands are being shaped by people, editorial entities are being shaped by readers more so than Anna Wintour. So if people are informing what's being written about, which then informs people, which then informs being what's written about, which then informs people, where does that cycle start? And I would argue it starts with the people nowadays. So what's a little scary is we're reading, we're watching, we're buying a mirror of ourselves, because the things that are being advertised to us, the articles that are being written for us, are just empirically what we want as per data. And so it's just our own desires and biases and thoughts being reflected back to us. People love talking about echo chambers. You know, if you like reading hyper conservative articles, you'll be shown hyper conservative articles more on the platforms that you use. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You read the hyper conservative articles, that informs the hyper conservative editorials decisions on what to publish, which informs what you read, which informs your views, which informs what they write about. And they're just mirroring back and mirroring back. It's sort of insidious, you know, it's going to tear us apart if we're not careful, because whatever you are, you become more that, and whatever she is, she becomes more that. And so we all begin to become a more saturated version of ourself. And so the differences, the subtle differences between us, you know, 50 years ago, there were 3 news channels and they all reported pretty evenly what was happening in the world. And now you can turn on Fox or turn on CNN and get entirely paradoxical views on the exact same occurrence. Something happens and Fox says one thing and CNN says completely a different thing about the same thing. And so the people that are watching Fox and the people that are watching CNN have categorically different worldviews that are reinforced by the networks they watch. And so it just pulls the differences that already exist apart. And you see this in the data. If you look at how the Senate votes, in Reagan era politics, the overlap was like this, and it's slowly done this over the past 30 years, you know, where the overlap between the two parties has completely, the Venn diagram has thinned out like that. And that's happening across the board. So it's dangerous because I think we are becoming less empathetic. We are becoming more self-focused and self-reinforced and less interested in, curious about, and respectful of the other side's opinion.
So then, to bring everything full circle, I'm just curious what you think the difference is or similarities are between empathy and mirroring, and where that can kind of manifest.
I guess mirroring is sympathy and empathy is empathy. So if I were talking to a friend and she was describing a really, really rough day at work, and I'm an entrepreneur, I don't go into an office, I don't have a boss. she's like, my boss has been really mean to me. Maybe I can't empathize. Like, I haven't had a boss in 5 years. And so maybe I just say, wow, that sounds really tough. And oh, he said that to you. And oh, I'm so sorry, you know. And that's just sort of mirroring. It's just taking her emotion that she's sharing with me and me saying, yeah, wow, that must be really tough. And I'm not internalizing it and being like, wow, what would that feel like? And that is really tough. And that reminds me of how my dad is tough on me, or that reminds me of something that I actually can draw from. I understand. I understand why she's upset. Let me really access her and come to her from a place of mutual understanding to show her that I really understand. I really see her. So mirroring is about just saying intellectually I can understand that that's upsetting to you. I don't personally get it, but that sucks. And that can be helpful, but it's not the same as really seeing someone and relating and saying, I really, you know what? Wow, I feel in my gut the pain that you're feeling right now, and I know how unpleasant that is, and gosh, I'm sorry, and I'm here for you. That's empathy, right? And so whether it's a human being mirroring versus empathizing, or an editorial entity, it'd be one thing if the readers were giving comments and the writers were saying that's so interesting and let's make this a real dialogue, and then it becomes more interesting. But if it's simply just giving the people what they want to shut them up, like, yeah, 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 it sounds like you had a tough day, or yeah, 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 I know that you want to read about rigged elections, so we'll just publish a bunch of like articles about that. That's just mirroring, and it doesn't do anything except bolster the recipient's viewpoint. But it doesn't help you as the empathizer understand it any better, because you're simply just a wall. You're a mirror. So that's the danger, is that editorial is just building up someone's viewpoint without actually thinking about what they're doing. In the same way that someone's saying, wow, that sounds like a tough day at work. If you're not really thinking about it, you're just sort of helping the person feel sorry for themselves and moving on with your life. But you're not there with them. That's not intimacy. That's just mirroring. So I would argue that mirroring, it can be quite insidious if you're not careful. Whereas empathizing, you're at least taking it on board and putting it in through your own system. It makes you as the empathizer better because you understand how other people feel. And it makes you a better supporter of the person on the other side, whether it's a reader or a friend.
I want to also take this a little bit more broadly because when you suggested this topic, you called it empathy via the internet. So I'm curious, at what point were you kind of tipped off to the fact that empathy on the internet might be in short supply, and what would it look like to remedy that?
I think just what I was saying, like, it's a little gag worthy, like the use of echo chambers. We were talking about these in the 2016 election, let alone now, that like everyone thought Hillary was going to win. It's like, well, what do you mean everyone? It was me and all the liberal people that I hang out with in New York City and that went to college and so on. But like if I'd gone to West Virginia, or I'm in North Carolina now, if I'd gone to other pockets, I wouldn't have felt or seen that at all. If I'd exclusively watched Fox News, I wouldn't have felt or seen that at all. So people were concerned 4 years ago about the the insidious nature of an echo chamber and how it can convince you of a reality that may be out of touch with other pockets of reality. Um, so I think I started like thinking about it then, but just seeing it play out in e-commerce and marketing, seeing it play out in editorial, seeing it play out in politics, seeing people's beliefs or interests from a marketing perspective just get tighter and tighter and tighter because of how they're being marketed to. And then doing a lot of marketing myself, like understanding the power of retargeting. Oh, someone read this article or someone came to this part of my website. Let me show them this. Let me drill in deeper. Let me penetrate their brain deeper and deeper and deeper and brainwash them into wanting my product. That's effectively what marketing is and always has been, but is very effectively now. Like I have the mechanisms. I know how to work Facebook ads, say, to hit someone at the right times and move them along a customer journey to buy something that they might have only half wanted a month ago and now fully want. Like, I know how to brainwash someone. Um, and that's a lot of power. You know, if you know how to do that, that's like a scary thing. Um, and so it asks these much larger questions of like, what is truth? Or from a advertising and consumer perspective, what is needed? Like, what do people actually need? What should I actually be marketing? Like, you know, what should people actually be believing? What should people actually be reading? What is capital T truth? Right? And the really scary thing you realize is there really isn't any. Like, I'm not a religious person at all, but a good example would be like, let's say the Bible were, let's say it were just the word of God. You're a, what is the term? Someone who literally reads word for word every word of the Bible. That is the word of God. That is capital T truth. That is the way things are. A problem with that is that the Bible is just a book, and then there are layers of interpretation. So a priest will read it, and then to his or her congregation, share their thoughts on the matter, help to train and annotate and describe what was meant by sometimes sort of cryptic version, like, you know, what did God mean when this was said? And that human interpretation has bias in it. And then as it enters the ear of one person in the congregation versus another, they bring their own, oh, that reminds me of this, or that reminds me of that, and their own interpretation. So truth is twisted and twisted and twisted. And by the time they leave that sermon, Sarah and Joe have two entirely different versions of truth that came from the same source. And so you come to realize that there is no truth, there is no absolute. And so where does that leave us? How do we want to educate people? How do we, like, what is important for people to read or understand or believe or enforce? You know, unfortunately, like, there is no question on earth that you could ask 1 million Americans and have more than 900,000 of them agree. No question. Is the sky blue? Is murder bad? You know, you would have a fraction of these people that would believe something that would make most people go, how could you possibly believe that? But we see that play out time and time again. So it's very scary. But maybe to bring it to more positive a place, if there is no truth, then the only truth is the truth you make. And you realize that you actually, as an individual, which is why I'm always so individual focused, you know, audit yourself, harden yourself. You have the ability to forge your own truth, to come up with your own reality, to seek out rooms and people that are willing to share in your reality and whose reality you're willing to share in. You know, and so you can have anything happen to you. You can lose your job or lose your spouse or win $1 million or lose $1 million, and you can view that positively or negatively. You can view it however you want. You can form your own take on it, your own reaction, your own reality. And so you as the individual actually have complete autonomy and power to determine how you feel. You can't control the things that happen to you, but you can control the thoughts that you have after it happens, and therefore the feelings that you hold about that occurrence.
I want to go back to something that you said about halfway through that answer, with regard to the fact that as a marketer, you kind of hold the power to brainwash people and to use this data to effectively get them to do what you want. I'm curious if empathy plays any part in your decision to either not do that or to do that a little bit less than the full extent of that, um, and what that looks like.
No, I mean, it's impossible, right? Like, let's say for argument's sake that I believed, which I do, that the vaccine is a good thing and that people should get the COVID vaccine. 35% of Americans don't hold that belief. Like 100 million people are like, nah, I don't agree. Like that's 100 million people. So let's say I have this gift as a marketer to brainwash people. Like I can use data and I can run ads and I can help people see the world a certain way. And I believe that the vaccine is good. And frankly, the majority believes that. And my uncle who's a doctor believes that. And a lot of like trustworthy like people believe. So is that capital T true? Like, is it empirically true that the vaccine is good? And I would say yes, but 100 million people say no. And so should I push it and help the 100 million people that are wrong see it my way? Or should I be empathetic and be like, maybe they don't, maybe they're right. Maybe they have information that I don't, or maybe for them it is wrong and I shouldn't play a role in trying to change their mind. And so you don't know what to do. It's like, I don't know if I really believe in a product, like I believe the hub is the best place on the internet to make content. So should I push that out there because I think it could help people save money and get better content? I really do believe that. Or am I manipulating people because some people would disagree? And I don't know the answer. Like there is no answer because no matter what the truth is, a lot of people would say that that's actually an anti-truth. It's actually wrong. And so how do I, as the person who can help people think one way or the other, do I do it more or less? And maybe the answer is not at all. You know, it's hard to know. Like a lot of my liberal friends are like, gosh darn it, if only the world were to understand this or that or see it this way. And I always challenge them and I say, if you were a totalitarian dictator and you could just decree equal pay for men and women, equal pay for all races, I want to change this. I want to make this completely equitable and fair. The reality of that is that there is no fair. Any one totalitarian dictator would bring his or her biases and they would enact things that are, to in the eyes of many, many, many people, completely unfair. And so what is right? Does any one person, and like all of the examples we have from history of Marxist regimes, such totalitarian regimes, whether it's Mao or Stalin or whomever, you know, the idea was to try to make things equitable, to take from those with ability and give to those with need. That was the creed of Stalinist Marxism. Take with those from ability and give to those with need. Equitable spreading of resources. And 10x the people that died in the Holocaust died in Stalin's Russia. We don't talk about this in Ukraine. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like one person thinking he or she knows best doesn't, because there is no absolute truth. And no one person's conceptualization of fair or true or equitable is correct, because to another group of people, it is inequitable. And so people that want to change the world politically, or people that want to market a product they believe in, or none of us have it right, because we are all different and we all have different beliefs. So sidelining is an option, but I don't think steering really hard towards spreading what I believe is a truth is a good course of action, nor do I believe that trying to empathize with and spread the counter truth is a good reaction, because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's a heavy sword to wield.
Well, that takes us to time. Is there anything else about empathy on the internet that you would want people to know?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article a long time ago about a quirky idea I had, which was sort of the anti-algorithm, which is to say, like, increasingly the internet fits all of us like a glove. It shows us exactly what we want to see, buy, feel at any given time. It shows it to us, you know. in 10 years, Spotify will just play the song that you're in the mood for hearing, and it will tell you what outfit to wear. And like we're coming out of an artificial intelligence winter for real. And in the next decade, there are going to be pretty seismic changes where the internet can intuit what you want very immediately. And so I think it would be a really interesting empathetic exercise to have, say, a serial number that you could just trade with someone, with a friend, or with someone totally different than you. Like, let me get the serial number of a guy in West Virginia who exclusively watches Fox News and owns 27 guns and is very different than me living in Brooklyn. And let me punch in his serial number to the internet and experience the digital world, which increasingly is just the world, through his eyes. Let me walk a mile in his shoes for a week. What articles am I reading? What products am I buying? What songs am I listening to? Like, if I put his digital shoes on and live it for a week, maybe I come out the other side and I say, wow, you know, at the very least, I understand why he's out there picketing for, you know, uh, boycotting the vaccine. I understand why he feels that way now. I don't agree, but I understand. Or I understand why he voted for Trump, or I understand, like, maybe that would bleed some empathy if we all took a week out of our year to view, increasingly our entire world, everything on our phone, everything on our computer, everything in our smart ecosystem, everything that Alexa does, everything that we do digitally was done as if it was for someone else. And maybe then we could learn to think like that someone else, and maybe then we could learn to sort of not so quickly fall into the death spiral of affirming our own beliefs and shutting out anything else, and realize that truth is malleable. I think that that is a little bit of a quirky, cute idea, but it's an example of where our salvation lies, which is realizing that other people have just as firm and poignant and salient beliefs as we, and that in their estimation, they're just as entitled to feel that way, and they are.